I will never get a hair transplant. And it is something I've thought about. I've considered it. And I mean, it probably would improve my life because being bald is probably the biggest flaw I have in my physical appearance. That combined with how small my head is. But if I got a hair transplant, and assuming it looked good and natural and everything, then that would make my head look more normal and I would look a lot better. I would look kind of like back before I went bald, like when I was a teenager. Back then, I was definitely a lot better looking than I am now. So you might think getting a hair transplant would be a no-brainer for me. So what's the holdup? Why do I say that I will never get a hair transplant? Well, this might seem kind of weird, and I know a lot of you just won't understand this no matter how I phrase it, but it's just so fake. And I've talked a bit about this before, but I really do value integrity as something that is super important to me. And that's probably an unpopular opinion to most black pillars, but whatever, I couldn't change it if I wanted to. I have something deep within me that makes me care just so much about just always being honest and having integrity. It could just be me being brainwashed from my childhood where I was going to church and going to Christian school and just having certain morals drilled into me, but I don't know. And frankly, I don't care. I know who I am and I know how I am, and I know I just could not live with myself if I was walking around with a hair transplant, just walking around fraudulently showing off a false version of myself to the world. I am a bald man. I just am. That's the real me. And I'll probably eventually make a video about this too, but makeup is for clowns. Period. No exceptions. Makeup is for clowns, and anyone that wears makeup might as well be a clown in my eyes because that is fake. And it's the same for breast implants, and it's the same for BBLs, and it's the same for hair transplants. It's fake. It's all fake, and I'm not having it. I don't judge other men negatively for getting a hair transplant because I do understand it can improve your quality of life. So really, I don't blame you if you get one, but I could never do that for myself. And again, I know this isn't even logical, but I'm old enough to know better by now. I know better than to try to fight against my natural instincts. And that sense of always wanting to represent myself honestly, that's one of my most deeply held natural instincts. There's nothing I can do to rid myself of that feeling. So if I got a hair transplant, I would just have a constant internal struggle about it. I would hate myself even more than I do now. I just could not live with myself if I got a hair transplant. And to any of you right now that are thinking, oh, but actually a hair transplant, it's not fake. It uses your real hair follicles. It's real. It's really a part of you. Well, to that I say, congratulations on being astronomically retarded. Like, this shouldn't even need to be said because it's just flat out obvious to anyone that isn't on the left side of the IQ bell curve. But if you naturally do not have hair follicles on a certain part of your scalp, removing hair follicles from one part of your body and placing them where they would not naturally be is unnatural. That is the definition of fake. I don't care if it really comes from your own body. That doesn't make it any less fake. And what's funny is, all the guys coping with the whole, oh, actually a hair transplant is natural. You just know if you ask those guys about a BBL, a Brazilian butt lift, they'd all say, oh, that's fake and that's disgusting. But it's not any more fake than a hair transplant. It's literally the same exact thing. Taking something from part of your own body and putting it somewhere else. It's fake and it's unnatural. And frankly, it's clown shit. And I may be a clown myself in some ways, but I am not a clown when it comes to being fraudulent on my own physical appearance. And I do think I could be a bit hypocritical in a sense because I did get braces as a kid and that definitely improved my looks by a lot. Like, my teeth were really crooked. It was pretty bad. And I was a kid back then, so, I could say, well, I didn't know any better and I just made a mistake, but actually, I still don't really feel the same way about braces as I do about something like a hair transplant. And I think part of it might be because teeth straightening just doesn't seem as unnatural. It is kind of unnatural to move your teeth around with metal wires and stuff, but all you're changing there is the angle of your teeth. Like you aren't actually physically removing something and placing it somewhere else. So something about that just feels more natural to me. But honestly, maybe I'm just coping here. I mean, I know I'm not completely immune from society's influence, so maybe the only reason I think teeth straightening is okay while hair transplants are fraudulent, it might be just because teeth straightening is so commonplace. Like, I think literally most people get braces nowadays, so it's kind of like the default. Like, if you don't get braces, you are at a severe disadvantage, and nobody will look down on you for trying to straighten your teeth. Whereas with a hair transplant, I still think the vast majority of bald men, they don't get a hair transplant. And most people in society will think something negatively about you if they know you've had a hair transplant. So maybe it is just a case of me being a slave to society's influence, but I also don't really care if that's the case. Because when it comes to internal mental struggles, I know which battles to fight and which to let go. And my dedication to integrity, that is a battle I should not fight. I really think I'm better off just sticking with my gut when it comes to this one thing. So that makes anything like a hair transplant, it's a no-go. It's just a no-go for me. Now, as silly as this sounds, I would consider trying out a hair piece, like a toupee or whatever you want to call it. I would consider trying that out, but I don't know. Like, yes, that would also be a way of falsely representing myself to the world, but since it's not permanent, like it's basically just a hat or something. I feel like I could at least try that out for a day or two and see how I like it. And maybe if I did, that might change my mind about hair transplants. But I don't know, and I don't really have any plans to get a toupee. I'm just saying something about it just seems more reasonable than a hair transplant, but I'm not seeking it out or anything. And another thing about hair transplants, I think maybe it would make more sense if I mentioned this one thing. I am a kissless, hugless virgin, but I'm past the point of wanting to just get laid and have sex with random girls. Like, I'm sure that would be fun. I'm not doubting that at all. But what I really want, and I think what I really need, is an actual relationship with a woman that cares about me the same way I care about her. And let's say I get a hair transplant and that helps me attract women. Well, okay, if I actually get into a relationship, I will eventually have to tell my girlfriend about the hair transplant. Like, I'm not supposed to just keep that a secret forever, There's no way you could do that. So she is going to end up knowing I'm bald one way or another. And, maybe she won't even care. But then she'd be saying stuff like, oh, I don't even care if you're bald and stuff like that I know is obviously just 100% untrue. And she might not even be lying. Maybe she really believes that, but it is untrue. She actually would care whether she's lying to her own self or just lying to me. It doesn't really matter because at that point, I would not be able to respect her for how dishonest she is, even if it's her being dishonest with herself, because that's not something I want passed down to my children. And so basically, I just think any relationship that would come as the result of a hair transplant, it would just be doomed from the start. So even the biggest benefit I would hope to get from a hair transplant, getting into a relationship, it's cursed from the start. A loving relationship, the main thing I actually would hope to get out of the whole operation, it's destined to be a sham. When my hair started falling out in my late teens, early 20s, whenever it was already over from that point forward. A hair transplant is not going to fix this. And sometimes I think it wasn't just my hair that fell out, because I haven't just lost my hair. That's just the physical part. The hair itself is just the physical manifestation of what I really lost by going bald. I lost my hope. I lost all sense of hope I could possibly have ever hoped to have. That is what I really lost That is what losing hair is for a man. And I know this is cringe, but I always think back to that famous line from Blade Runner when the android guy dies at the end. He's talking about all his memories and feelings and stuff he's had throughout his life, and he says, all those moments will be lost in time, like tears in the rain. And in a sense, that's what it's like when you lose your hair. But it's not the memories and feelings you've already had in the past that you're losing, like tears in the rain. It's all the potential future experiences that you would have formed fond memories of if you hadn't lost your hair. It's all that you're losing when you lose your hair. I really feel like that. So, all those future moments I could have had that I should have had, all that was lost. And it wasn't lost like tears in the rain, it was lost like hairs in the drain. Fuck. Maybe that's what the movie was actually about in the first place.